Hello, future educators, and welcome back. So, I'm calling this video Intro to Emergency Procedures, but that is kind of like, maybe this video won't be quite what you expect, and that's because I cannot tell you what the emergency procedures are going to be at whatever schools you're placed at, either for your field experiences or once you're teachers. Okay? I can tell you some things about the experience of being a teacher in an emergency situation. Okay? And there are a few different types of situations I'm going to talk about. A theme that's going to run through what I'm talking with you about is that by the time you're in situation, you will have been told what the procedure is at whatever school you are at. And B, you will have acquired some tools that you can just pull out anytime in order to use in situations that are unexpected. Okay, so first off, let's talk about bleeding kid, right? So I have a list of a few things that I'm going to touch on, right? Bleeding kid varies from school to school, all right? In my experience, the way you react to an injury in a classroom is similar to how you react to it when you're not in a classroom. So, kid, I don't know, falls out of their chair, bonks themselves on the head bleeds, right? First thing you're going to do is go, oh my goodness, right? And as you become more experienced, you get more experience with not reacting like, because you don't want to freak out the rest of the kids. But your first reaction, the feeling is like, oh my goodness, this has happened. And then what happens next is going to depend on the procedures at your school and how severe the injury is, right? So, at your school, it may be, and the kid is basically fine, they're just bleeding. It may be that you have, another kid walk with that kid down to the nurse's office. It may be that you've been, every classroom is equipped with a first aid kit, and you get it, and you have the kid hold a bandage or a little piece of gauze to their head while they wait for someone to come from the nurse's office and get them. There are a lot of different permutations, but this is one of those common situations that it's going to be pretty clear to you what to do because they will have told you that in orientation. Now, if there's something that happens, and things happen that we don't expect, that they haven't told you about in orientation, there's the teacher next door, right? There's always a teacher who's going to be next door to you or across the hall from you, almost 100% of the time, okay? And what I've done is called out to the teacher next door, particularly when I was a new teacher. Hey, Mrs. Johnson, what do I do? And if you watched my September 11th video, you saw I went across the hall and I asked Mrs. Haley, she's a more experienced teacher, what do I do? I'm talking with her. There's going to be somebody more experienced around you. Now, while you're a student teacher, you're almost never going to be in the room alone, the only adult in the room, because that's really not allowed. So if your mentor teacher happens to not be in the room at that moment, you can assume that they're going to be back very quickly. So you don't have to really worry about that because they know what the procedure is going to be for your school. Okay, kid throwing furniture, right? Or any kind of like that out of control kid. The kid is either, throwing something that they shouldn't be thrown, but this idea that there could be an angry, out of control kid, and how do I deal with that? Now that's going to vary, right? There's going to be procedures at your school, but also that's going to vary by the age of the kid, right? So you can imagine that if one of my kindergartners threw something, it wasn't going to get very far. And it's fairly simple to have the other kids move away, okay? Boys and girls, Patrick is having a really bad day. Let's move away and give him some space, all right? And then other procedure, if it's an older kid, other procedures, there's probably a way for you to contact someone, whether it's an assistant principal or someone who does disciplinary things to come in and deal with the kid. But mostly, I guess the main thing is that by that time, you will have developed skills for interacting with upset kids. Okay? Because remember, I mean, for most of you, some of you are kind of on a fast track. For most of you, you're going to be in our teacher education program for 2 more years. And so you're going to have time to develop these skills, okay? And often the relationship that you have with the kid is going to determine how you will react to the out of control kid. Yeah. That said, if 2 really huge high schoolers are fighting and you're not huge yourself, I do not recommend jumping in the middle and pushing those kids apart because you will get whacked and it will be your own fault. No, I'm kidding. You will be told what to do, okay, with a so-called out of control kid. Let's talk about fire. Okay, I've had a lot of experience. I mean, okay, fire drills are kind of like the first thing that happens. They happen multiple times throughout the year. You get practice with fire drills. I'm sure you all experienced that as students. Now, from the other side of the desk, as teachers, whereas as students you're just waiting for the teacher to tell you what to do, as teachers you'll know the instructions that you're supposed to give to your kids, okay, to your students. So, for example, there were times when the instruction was leave everything where it is and line up. Okay, that was the instruction I was supposed to give to the kids. Sometimes, depending on the weather, and the principal would come over the loudspeaker and tell us, I would say, go get your coat, but leave everything at your desk. Leave everything else at your desk and line up. These kinds of things are going to vary. Often you'll be given, if it's not a drill, okay, the drills you'll get practice, but if it's not a drill, sometimes it'll vary. Here it's basically warmish all the time. So, it might not vary that much for a fire drill, but you'll be given instructions somehow. Now, different schools do it different ways. I was teaching, like years and years ago, so the only way to do it was the PA system. I'm certain that some schools by now have some kind of automatic notification through your cell phones. When I was teaching, there was always a phone in the classroom because, like an old style phone where you're teaching, that might not be the case because there might be other procedures. But again, you're going to be told how to do it. And if there's a question you have at orientation that they have not addressed, you can always ask. And if there's something that happens that was addressed at orientation you completely forgot because that was ages ago, there's always the teacher next door. Okay. Lockdown. Now, this can be scary because they can't come over the loudspeaker or they can't text you. Usually they don't text you or come over the loudspeaker and say exactly what the situation is. It's just a lockdown. And sometimes it's a code, they say code something or other over the loudspeaker, right? And so you're not sure as the adult exactly what's going on. But you will know what the procedure is, okay? And there are variations. There's some things that are called lockdowns and other things that are called shelter in place. You experience some of these as students. You may feel nervous. Okay, what am I going to do as a teacher? Again, you will have had instruction. If you didn't have instruction, one of the things I did particularly when I was teaching at a new school, and later on when I actually had a cell phone, I programmed in the phone number for the front office, right? And that helped in a few different ways. That helped, like if I had the, kind of out of control kid and I needed to get a assistant principal, or if there was something ambiguous, that came over the loudspeaker and I needed clarification. Usually the secretary can say, oh yeah, no, the kids can go to the bathroom. They just nobody's going outside or whatever it is. So on a typical lockdown, and I was in a lockdown one time, there was a question about whether someone with a gun was driving down the highway, and I was at a school that was right next to the highway, right? So we're on a lockdown, right? And, depending on the situation, we might need to be away from the windows. Depending on the situation, we might, need to be, the kids may not be able to go to the bathroom, right? So there was one lockdown I was on, and yes, the kids were supposed to stay in the room. Nobody was supposed to be in the halls. And sometimes those situations happen because there's a lost kid, right? Somebody lost a first grader, and they want everybody out of the hall so they can try and find this lost kid, right? So I remember one time I was teaching, and one of the students, let's call her Nikki said, Miss Key, I was Miss Key then, right? Before I was Dr. Campoli. Miss Key, I gotta go to the bathroom, I gotta go. Oh my goodness, Miss Key, I gotta go. And I'm like, sorry, Nikki, we're on a lockdown. Where no one is allowed to leave the room and go to the bathroom. She's like, Miss Key, I gotta go, please. I don't think she actually went to crying, but, I said, look, there are cups over by the water fountain. You can get a cup and you can go to the bathroom in that. She chose to hold it until the lockdown was over, and usually these things, again, are very brief. Sometimes they're drills, and so it's like 5 minutes. Sometimes they're not drills, and it's longer. In any case, you find ways to get through it, and you will be prepared to lead the kids in those kinds of situations. Fire. Oh, I forgot to mention about fire. My thing is always take your purse with you, because I've been on fire situations where, we were back in, they just came, they found that it was a false alarm, and within 15, 20 minutes, we were back in the classroom. I also have been in situations where there actually was a gas leak, and we came out and we waited for a few hours until dismissal, and they dismissed people, and staff and faculty still were not supposed to go back into the school. So no matter what happens, I'm grabbing my purse, which may not exactly follow the right procedure, but in my experience, I always wanted to have my purse. I always wanted to have my wallet and my cell phone. Okay. Another thing to always have is a list of the kids, and usually the schools have a form that you fill out that has the kids and their emergency contact information, and often it may be posted right by by your door. You just grab it, you go out. So if you do have to dismiss from the playground or the school, the community center next door, or you have to dismiss from somewhere other than your school, you can call the parents and let them know what's going on. Okay. Active shooter. Now this is completely terrifying because it's in a way it's new, and the policies aren't set, and it almost seems like there's nothing that can be done to make any school completely safe. And the upsetting thing is that even when we're out in the world, and we're believing that we're completely safe, there really is nothing that we can do to control what's uncontrollable, right? And that's really scary. But we find a way to manage those feelings out in the world, and you'll find a way to manage those feelings when you're in your school setting, okay? In terms of your student teaching, before student teaching, you will get active shooter training, okay? And I think that's delivered by your school. And then typically in your district, again, during orientation, right, some kind of onboarding process for new teachers, you'll get active shooter training, okay? It's the scariest thing. I've only been in the situation where the potential shooter was driving down the highway. I am glad to say that the vast majority of teachers and former teachers in the U.S., none of us have been in an actual active shooter situation, okay? But it's the scariest thing. Now, with all of these things, there may be certain kinds of emergency situations that for you are particularly scary, okay? And usually this depends on your your life history, right? If it had to do with illness or accidents, it may be the bleeding kid. If you were affected by someone who really just had a mental break and kind of was out of control, violent, then it may be the kid throwing furniture. If you've been in a fire, it might be the fire situation. Whatever it is, Okay. I know that there are certain things that, like, for each of us personally, just like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I could ever be a teacher because teachers have to deal with X. But I want to reassure you that by the time you are the teacher of record, by the time you are the lead teacher in a classroom, you will have been told strategies or the procedures for dealing with these emergency situations. And more than that, you will have both your common sense and the tools that you will have acquired over the course of your field experiences and your student teaching that will prepare you for that. And finally, you always have the teacher next door or across the hall. Okay? I can't tell you that, no one will ever get hurt in your classroom. I won't tell you that because or in your school, or there won't be a tragic situation that happens in your school or your neighborhood. We just can't control what happens in the future. But I can tell you that you will have skills that you do not have right now. You will have resources that you do not have right now. And anything that happens, even, these terrible hurricanes, anything that happens, people survive. People are resilient. People find ways to cope and even to excel, despite those situations. Okay. I hope this has been helpful. And I hope you have a great day. All right. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.